Hello and welcome to Going Beyond Security, brought to you by Salient Systems. I'm your host, James Kent. Salient Systems offers comprehensive video surveillance management systems designed for the full range of surveillance technology needs, from analog to IP to cloud. Today, I'm joined by two security experts, Grant Cowan, Director of National Accounts at Salient Systems, and Keith Abali, Founder, President, and CEO of Navigate Group. Navigate specializes in loss prevention, risk management, and asset protection in business and retail operations. Grant and Keith, how are you both doing today?
Hey, doing well, James. Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you, James.
Gentlemen, there's no easy way around it. The topic today is a tough one, and that is looking at ways to leverage surveillance in an active shooter scenario. I mean, I wish we didn't have to have a show focused on this topic, but this is a reality we face in the United States, and anything businesses can do to minimize threats and proactively prevent risk is a good thing. So, what we're going to do today is talk specifically about 5 ways businesses can leverage surveillance in an active shooter scenario. Why don't we jump right in? And as a starting point, before we get into the specifics of how companies can leverage surveillance, tell me about the active shooter risks today and the role in which surveillance technology has changed in this area.
Yeah, great question, James. What we see today, I think more than anything, is it's all about expectations, and that's kind of the first thing that as a security team or as a business owner, you have to understand is there's expectations. Our consumers, our customers, our employees, our associates, they expect to have video surveillance. They expect action to be had, and that's the biggest thing that we're trying to get across is that there are those expectations out there. Because when we turn on the news, unfortunately, we're going to see the news coverage. We're going to see the beginning of the video surveillance footage. So there's all those different things that the general public sees, and that's what they first really want is they have that expectation that this should be under video surveillance, and how can this situation be managed? And so the way that the roles of the surveillance technology comes in there is that when we're talking to business owners, whether it's in retail or finance or manufacturing, what we're trying to do is set the expectation that they need to have an enterprise environment. And that's the first thing we have to do to leverage a video surveillance system is to have an enterprise system. We have a lot of users out there that have disparate systems. So when they want to access different locations, they may have to access different platforms, different softwares. They may have different usernames and passwords for all these locations. It's been kind of a managed by Band-Aid scenario. So when we see out there the consumers, the people out in the marketplace, they expect these corporations to have video surveillance and they expect it to work properly. And then from that expectation, we expect our customers or the video surveillance users out there, they need to have the expectation that they are using an enterprise level system. That's first and foremost to make it simple for a single sign on to access systems remotely and to have that connectivity. And I know, when Keith and I are working on different projects, he's trying to set that same tone for those type of customers out there.
Keith, did you want to add anything else to that?
As an end user, and I spent 25 years as an end user at the Walmart and the Home Depot. Our greatest fear as an end user is a active shooter scenario. And the thing that keeps us up at night is that we have all these technologies available at our disposal. Are we engaging them to give us the absolute most effective time warning indication that something may be amiss? And what Salient Systems and what Grant's talking about are tools that are critical to pull all this together so that we can use what we have to prevent the loss of life. And that really is our mission, is to protect our customers, our associates and employees at every turn.
Absolutely. Well, let's discuss the first thing you see from a surveillance standpoint that businesses can leverage to either make their operations safer or assist in the event of an active shooter situation. Grant?
Yeah, so I think the number one thing that pops up when any conversation starts, it's analytics, and I mean, you can't turn on the TV on on just a generic channel and not hear about AI or how the advent of learning of deep learning technology. It's a common discussion item on television when it relates to vehicles, when it relates to the news, whatever it may be. And so the number one thing that we get asked is how can we use analytics to do that better? And that's really where we start that conversation. And the goal with using video analytics is to expand the zone. And as Keith pointed out, as an end user, our end users are asking, how do we get more time? And the way we look at it from a surveillance side is like, how many zones out from the building or away from the associates, the employees, and the customers, how far out can we make that zone where we're trying to identify potential threats and give Keith and his team more time to identify and figure out what we can do to help? So when we look at video surveillance analytics, we see gunshot detection where we're pinpointing a location based on where the gunshot came from, an audio alert. Then we're also looking at gun detection, and we have a lot of fantastic partners that are using AI to model great analytics based on weapons detection, on seeing an image in a camera. So even before that gunshot goes off, we're able to say, okay, we think it's maybe a potential weapon, or there may be a potential fight, somewhere in the parking lot, or before they get inside that building. Those are things we're trying to do to give Keith and the user time more time there at the edge. And from the salient perspective, what we're trying to do with our VMS is to create a myriad of ways that we can distribute those alerts and try to find the right way for the customer to navigate to one, to validate that analytic, and then to go through a step-by-step plan once they validate that on how they're going to respond.
Yeah, very good, Grant. And, the great thing about Salient Systems and the reason that I partner with them for my end user clients is because they have the ability to design technologies and bring third-party technologies into play and make them seamless into an end user's operation. The other thing that we focus on is training and development and communications within the retail organization, because you can have that information available, but if you don't disseminate it properly, quickly, swiftly to the right people, then the information is going to be useless. And one thing that Salient and I try to do is work with retailers to help reassure that they have those provisional plans in place to execute whenever we provide the data to them that they need to have.
So analytics is the first, and then of course you got to make sense of those analytics. What about our second best practice, if you will?
Yeah, and James, I think it's easy to just kind of follow the chain as we see there. So, once we see the analytic that's been identified or validated within the store, we got to figure out where to send it and what to do with it. And so that the next big thing we have to talk about there, that number two, is remote connectivity, and how do we send that connection back to whether it's a police department or it's a security operations center within the end user environment. How are we going to send that alert out? The other thing that we have to be cognizant of, and things that we're working on constantly, is, once again, it goes back to that what we started with, that expectation. The consumers in the marketplace, they just expect and they assume that the video is being transmitted back and the people are accessing it, but it's a lot more difficult than that. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to eliminate the amount of bandwidth that's being sent off. Is that we have a lot of customers that are deploying, anywhere from 2 to 10 megapixel cameras in these stores. And typically our remote customers don't have a lot of bandwidth availability. It's not like sitting at my house and being able to access 200 gig internet from Spectrum. But, what we try to do is we try to eliminate the bandwidth that's being sent up the pipe. So when those analytics are received by the police department, security operations center for that validation, we're not taking all the bandwidth available, and we're allowing more and more people to access the system. And so during 2020, we actually created a software feature within our product called ProxyCast that allows us to broadcast video out. And we built that in coordination with Keith's team. and his end user feedback, where we're able to send that live and recorded video out through one single connection and eliminating bandwidth that could be then broadcast out to many users across their network. And Keith's team was huge in helping us architect that from what their people are asking for, what the industry is asking for.
Keith?
Yeah,
Like-
let me give you this analogy. If you've ever driven in Los Angeles or Atlanta or Washington, D.C. during rush hour, and you're trying to get from point A to point B, and then you see this wide open HOV lane where nobody's at, this is exactly what Grant's talking about. We have so much information coming in as asset protection end users, critical information. And for instance, in an active shooter situation, you may have 35, 40 people from corporate office trying to dial in to get a look at the cameras. You may have law enforcement. You may have information that you're trying to send out, video clips of suspects. And it's almost impossible or improbable to do it in today's environment. But that riddle's been solved. The HOV lane for information has been developed, and Salient's developed it. So now you can go immediately and get that information transmitted. You can receive. Multiple people can log in and look at the situation. And that's what we're talking about, James. And that's what's critical is speed saves lives. And I've got to reiterate that throughout this whole podcast.
Absolutely. All right. So we've talked about analytics and the importance of remote connectivity. What would be the third solution that we need to put in place?
Yeah, I think it's the next thing that we try to do, and to really carry off what Keith just said there, it's all about the speed. And so the next thing that we're looking to do is building different applications for whether it's the managers inside the store, whether it's the security operations center back in the home office, whatever that may be. We're trying to build those applications that can very quickly send those alerts to be either validated, or once that alert has been validated by an expert, then we're sending that alert out to the user. So what we see is, we don't have a lot of store managers, or we don't have a lot of people that are just sitting in their office anymore. Everybody's kind of mobile and working. So one of the things that we're really pushing is being able to have not only a desktop experience, but have an iPad, iPhone, Android experience as well that can take and receive these type of alerts, that can allow that user to very seamlessly move from their desk into their onto their iPad or iPhone without changing the user experience. And then being able to receive those alerts and then be able to start a coordinated command discussion with that security operations center or a police department, and being able to provide that full connectivity. And so what we try to design in the software is that basically a manager, if they got an alert on their desktop, could immediately stand up, be able to pull up their iPad and be able to start working from the same desktop experience that they were just working on their PC in their office, immediately move to their iPad or iPhone and start accessing that video. Now, it sounds really simple because we're able to do that with Netflix or Hulu or whatever, we do at home. But once again, trying to navigate different network configurations, trying to navigate, a single sign-on infrastructure for an end user, those are all things that they're looking at, that we as consumers at home with our apps on our phones and our TVs, we think it's simple, but we're constantly having to redesign the software to make that workflow environment very simple and easy to use in the most critical of times and during those type of events. And that's really where, when Keith and I are having these discussions with our software team, we're trying to mimic an environment that can save as much time as possible, whether it's seconds here or seconds there. And one of the things that we identified was being able to move from a desktop experience to a mobile experience very quickly.
Yeah, exactly, Grant. And one thing, James, it's important to know for the viewers here is that Salient is dedicated to this mission. And this mission is one that's due and has been needed for a considerable amount of time. There's been way too many active shooter scenarios and way too many lives that have been lost. But they're not creating this tool or this solution in a vacuum. Salient is very end user focused when it comes to development. We partner with our end users, and because we're a software house at Salient, they're able to design the specifications and needs for each of our users. so that we can custom and tailor something that's going to work with their infrastructure. I don't want people to be afraid that this is too large of a project to tackle. Instead, I want them to look and say, do I have the solution that I need that gives me that time to respond and react? And if they don't, they should at least talk to us about what we can do to help them get there.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like what Salient's doing, it's a real holistic approach to surveillance, really covering all aspects to build kind of a total solution. So we've covered analytics, remote connectivity, applications, and the importance there. What would be our fourth solution that we should mention?
Yeah, I think it goes beyond just I think I'm going to save the last thing that we're working on from a technology standpoint for last. But one of the things that we also are seeing is what I like to call integrated training, and from when Keith and I are talking about these different things, I get an insight into what especially retailers are doing in distribution centers and in their stores to prepare for these situations. And the other thing so what we try to do is how do we incorporate video surveillance into that training aspect and making sure that it is ready to go into that mission critical situation. And also, how make sure that user is prepared to access the system and they know how to use the system and they're able to access the video very quickly. And so when we look at, all the technology is great, but at the end of the day, if it doesn't work and our users don't understand how to use it correctly in that mission critical environment, we failed as a technology operator. And so what we are trying to design is not only the technology features and integrating in these great analytics that are being modeled on a monthly basis. They're coming out so fast and we're able to take advantage of that technology. But we also want to figure out what's the best way to train the end users like Keith that he's working with, so that they can basically use the video surveillance and be able to access it like it's their iPhone or iPad that they're just pulling up and looking at Facebook or something that's very simple and easy to use. They do it every day and they have that quick understanding. How can we take that and push that into his world? And the way we do that is one is helping, in these key situations is putting our training available to end users through our website by allowing Keith and his team to look behind the scenes on how we're building our software, and they're providing that feedback on how actual users will use the system versus what this is the way we think it should work in a perfect world. And then the third step there is by putting it into the hands of end users, letting them go through those type of training events, whether it's a fire department responding to an event or an active shooter environment, and people responding using our system and then giving us feedback. So that's really kind of one of the key things, is working with partners like Keith and other retailers and business owners out there to help us build that system and getting that feedback from Keith and how we design it for the future.
Yeah, Grant, excellent point. And the other avenue, James, is our law enforcement and first responder integration and training, because that's a component that is as critical as having your own internal training mechanism for how you're going to respond. And Salient and the end users were focused on making sure that we're using and engaging law enforcement, first responders at every turn.
Yeah, I mean, you can have the analytics, can be well connected, have all the applications, but if you don't have the training, you're only going to go so far. So now we've talked about 4 solutions. What's the 5th piece that kind of puts this puzzle all together to deploy in an active shooter situation?
Yeah, James, I think, and I'm going to go back to where I started, and I think where I want to really expand, is that it goes back to the enterprise nature of the software. And I think sometimes, since Keith and I are in this on a daily basis and we're always diving into this, sometimes it's second nature for us. But we have to get the users out there for video surveillance to understand what true enterprise means. And we walk into a lot of scenarios where we see maybe a university that has maybe 37 types of DVRs out there on all different types of firmwares. And if they want to access a building, they basically have to look at an Excel sheet, figure out which system's at that building, you grab the username and password and try to log into the system through whatever software is using in that building. We see that in the retail world as well. They maybe have 4 or 5 different types of DVRs out there. So one of the things that we've been really committed to, in the past 4 or 5 years, is building that enterprise approach for customers. A couple of things that we've done that have been really kind of helped bridge that gap is we've created custom DVR integrations so that you can actually log into Salient as your primary video management software, and we can seamlessly connect you to third-party DVRs that may be existing in buildings, so that we can have that remote connectivity, and it's still a single sign-on, but we're accessing multiple systems. From the enterprise, we want to be able to create an environment where, using the ProxyCast or using our dynamic resolution scaling, police departments or a security operations center can have a single sign-on and be able to access systems, very quickly without having to have standing up in a very large environment to manage that. And so where we start and where we end in this conversation is building an enterprise solution for these customers and being able to look at everything that's out there and try to bring it all together. Because at the end of the day, as Keith pointed out earlier, it's the speed. And if we're trying to just figure out how to log into a system, or trying to figure out, hey, what at this location, what are they using there, and how do we access it? Then we're failing as a technology provider, because we're not providing that enterprise approach for customers to see everything in a single pane of glass. I want to see my analytics. I want to see my mobile apps. I want to see all my cameras, all my systems out there, and I want to do it with one single sign-on. And that's really where we're trying to work with Keith's approach, is to educate the customers out there on what a true enterprise solution looks like, and then how can Salient fold in our video management software to make that an enterprise solution.
And I'll finish, Grant, with a stern warning. No longer can we ignore the threat of active shooter. No longer can we see it as an unforeseeability. The rate of active shooting events that's occurring in this country, whether it be in a retail environment or whether it be in a general population area, it's happening. It's not diminishing, unfortunately. So we have to be prepared, and we have to engage every possible tool that's at our disposal to not only save lives, but to create a safer environment for every human being in this country. And I ask everybody to make sure that you're looking at your tool set and making sure that you're doing everything that you can within your power to bring all that disparate systemic process into one seamless way to try to improve your odds of having fatalities or casualties during one of these mass shooting events. And we're here to help, and anything we can do or provide advice, guidance, insight, we're willing to do. Give us a call. Thank you.
Now, do you have any specific examples of companies that have utilized these techniques that we've been talking about today?
Yeah, I think, I think without getting into too much on providing the secrets behind the sauce, but, I think one of the things that we always see is that, customers can, and our video surveillance customers are being able to quickly navigate on the fly. And I'll probably, where I think I would take the answer to this one is that when we're trying to interact with, different types of analytics from a technology standpoint, we take the analytics and then we feed out the response, to the users out there. One of the key things that we're seeing is that the ability to model these type of analytics is happening very, very quickly, where we are, able to teach the computers to that, hey, this is a gun, this is a knife, this is an automatic weapon, and they're able to look at millions of pictures very quickly and identify and learn very quickly on when to identify those, whether it's an indoor or outdoor camera, things like that. So one of the biggest things I see customers taking the ability to do is getting into that enterprise platform, like I talked about earlier, that allows you to bring in different types of analytics that can not only help with active shooter environment, but simple things like spill detection or or different things that are also that loss prevention, asset protection are worried about. So where I think our customers are really trying to navigate is trying to build the right platforms that can take, the things that we aren't aware of today, but in 3 or 4 years, if a certain scenario comes up and we're trying to do this, how quickly can we build a new and model a new AI analytic that can adapt and help our customers adapt very quickly?
Keith?
There are companies that are further along the technology highway when it comes to, I would say, AI surveillance techniques. And you have that really when you talk about any type of systemic platform within a retailer. You've got early adopters, and then you have those that are lagging behind significantly. And a lot of it has to do with revenue and spend. As a asset protection loss prevention leader, it's your responsibility to fight for budget dollars based on the priorities that you have. And I would think that global security and physical security and the prevention of these types of incidences would be high on your list. So it's your responsibility to absolutely fight for every budget dollar that you can and look for the best technologies that you can get your hands on and deploy it should you be lagging. And I will tell you, James, that in my experience, probably 50 to 70% of the companies really need to increase their activity in this area.
Yeah, I agree. So we've been talking today about ways to leverage surveillance in active shooter scenarios. We spoke about 5 different solutions, from analytics to connectivity, applications, which will allow people to quickly alert and respond to these situations, the importance of training, and then the overall creating, an enterprise integration within all of your surveillance technology on site for that true holistic approach. Now, I really want to thank both of you today, Grant Cowan, Director of National Accounts at Salient Systems, and Keith Aubele, Founder, President, and CEO of Navigate Group. I know this is not an easy conversation to have, but it is a very necessary one that all businesses need to have and should be addressing. Before we go, is there anything else related to surveillance and active shooter situations you'd like to mention or discuss?
Keith, I'll let you I'll let you start with that one and kind of talk about the end use perspective, and then I'll wrap it up.
The great thing about it is there's a lot of competition in the retail world. We face it all the time. A lot of folks that really don't want to share techniques or success stories. I saw this back in the day of organized retail crime. A wonderful thing happened. You had retailers that were opening their standard operating procedures and sharing victories with other retailers to try to combat that organized retail crime wave. And it had a tremendous impact on making headway in regards to everything that we needed to do from a legal standpoint all the way into a defensibility standpoint for stores to keep organized retail crime at bay. The same thing is happening in this dynamic where retailers are sharing their success stories and they're opening their books and they're opening their offices to other retailers to help understand how we can combat this. And I say, let's continue to do that. Let's continue to have the dialogue. Let's continue to force the initiatives, and let's continue to share the great practices that everyone's involved in trying to save lives. And I'm excited to see that happening. And I think we need to do a better job at that. And I'll do everything I can as well with Salient to make sure that happens.
Yeah, I think, Keith, I'm glad you went that direction. I think the other thing I'll say is that, and we didn't get much into it today, but we're always recommending that customers, whatever they do, they look for an open platform that can be flexible and malleable as they grow.
Yeah.
And that's where we recommend starting, whether it's Salient or another VMS. We highly recommend you look at something that's open platform, because if you would have said, "Hey, Grant, in 2019," or you said, "Hey, what's going to happen in 2020?" I couldn't predict anything that happened there. And so we can't predict what the next thing's going to be. And so the only thing that we can do as a technology provider is create an open platform that can talk to as many resources as possible, that can help organizations that Keith works with to find technology features that can help, and they can maximize their budget dollars. And the best way we do that, we think, is by creating an open platform that allows customers to grow, to have flexible options for the future, and they're not hardwired into a certain type of technology that doesn't allow them to have adjustability on the fly. So at the end of the day, all the things that we talked about are great today, but what that foundation needs to look like, it has to have the technology has to be an open platform, has to have the ability to grow, and has to have the flexibility to change as that customer identifies changes that need to happen.
Grant and Keith, if folks have follow-up questions or want to discuss surveillance options further, where should they go? How should they get in touch? Grant?
Yeah, you can find a lot of information on Salient and our solutions on our website, www.salientsys.com. And if you want to reach out directly, you can send an email anywhere on the website, or you can reach me directly at grant.cowan@salientsys.com.
Keith?
Yeah, thank you. You can access my website at Navigate. It's NAV1GATE.com, navigate.com, or you can contact me through that website, or at k.aubele@nav1gate.com, and I'd be happy to answer any questions or put you in touch with Salient or anyone else that can help you with some of your challenges.
Grant Cowan and Keith Aubele, thank you for your time today.
Thanks, James.
Thank you very much, James. Appreciate the time.
And thank you for tuning in to Going Beyond Security, brought to you by Salient Systems. Stay tuned for additional episodes coming up in the near future. Until then, I'm your host, James Kent, saying stay safe and let's talk again soon.